Now we're live, and oh my gosh, so many are joining. Um, I'm
Yay.
so I'm so excited to be talking to you. I have not met you yet, but every person I talk to is always like, "Have you met Chris Taylor yet? She's so great." So this is just awesome to talk to you. And for those of you who are just joining, I'm Kate Duffy from Motherhood for Good, and we have Judge Chris Taylor with us today, who is a candidate in the upcoming Wisconsin Supreme Court election.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Kate. I'm so excited to be here. And this is my first Substack interview.
Oh my gosh. Well, I
Sure.
I love it. I just talked to Governor Whitmer the other day, and it was her
I know.
first Substack interview too. So
Wow.
we're just, who else is out there who wants to out you can do your first one with me. I'll go easy on you. Just putting that out there. But yes, okay. So why don't you well, first of all, before I kind of get into it,
Yeah.
the Wisconsin Supreme Court is I mean, obviously, we're both in Wisconsin, but it's a pretty nationally known type of race. It's been very big in the headlines the past few years, a lot of money um, for many reasons, but also the courts are really important. Wisconsin is really important. There's some big figures that have kind of jumped into it. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because also I know it's a very interesting background. I know you're an attorney, and then, you've also been a legislator. Can you walk us through how you got to this point?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I have, I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer, though there are no lawyers in my family, because I learned I was really close with my maternal grandma. And she was a single mom to my mom for most of my mom's life and struggled to make ends meet until she got a union job.
Mm.
And that union job enabled her to earn a fair wage and enabled her to support my mom and help her go to college. My mom was an elementary school teacher. And I learned the power of the law, that the law has this amazing ability to pick people up, to improve their lives, to change their lives. So, that was over. I graduated from law school here at UW 30 years ago, over 30 years ago. I have had just I'm so grateful for my career, honestly. I've learned so much from the people I've had the opportunity to work with. I was in private practice for a while in the Milwaukee area. And then I got one of my dream jobs working for Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin as their law and policy director. And I got to work on all these super important issues on good policies to protect access to reproductive health care and to make sure that people were able to make their own personal private healthcare decisions. From there, I did something I never imagined that I would do. I ran for the state legislature. And like so many moms, because I'm a mom of two kids, I
Mhm.
ran because I was worried about my kids. At the time, I had a 4-year-old son and a 6-month-old son. And
You ran a campaign with kids that age?
yes.
Oh
Ah,
my gosh.
but women do it, right? We're
They
motivated.
do. Yeah, they do.
We're motivated because we want better for our kids. We
Mhm.
so want our kids to have every opportunity and every child to have opportunities. And in 2011, you know, Governor Scott Walker was our governor. There was a really large cut to public education. My little 4-year-old at the time was going off to kindergarten at our public elementary school right around the corner. And I walked through that school in the spring of 2011 and just thought, oh my gosh, we are shortchanging every child in this building because of those cuts. And so I was motivated to run because of my kids. So I ran. I didn't know that I would win. In fact, I said to my husband the night before the election, "Do you think I could win?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think you could win." So, I did that for 9 years and worked on all the issues. I think as moms, we really value access to health care.
Mhm.
making sure our environment is clean and our kids are protected, and making sure working families have a fair chance and they get a piece of the pie that they make every day. And
Right.
so I did that and then realized really by 2020, I was wanting to go back to the courtroom. I really missed it. And I thought I could do more good as a judge and to really make sure people got heard and had access to justice. And so I was appointed by the governor to the Dane County Circuit Court, and I was there for 3 years and I loved it. I loved seeing people. I loved listening to the different sides of issues and really being challenged intellectually and in every way. And then in 2023, I ran for the Court of Appeals, which is where I sit now. And I was elected by 20 in Wisconsinites in 24 different counties. And I hear the appeals that are coming up from the circuit courts. So it's an amazing, amazing job. And it's what the state Supreme Court does really every day, but we have many more cases on the Court of Appeals.
Yeah. Well, and I love the way you talk about it. You have such like a warmth in your voice when you're talking about being a judge. And I think maybe what we don't talk about as much is obviously you're a lawyer and you were in the legislature. So you have that experience from a law perspective. But I imagine there's a certain amount of like just emotional intelligence and compassion that also goes into being a judge. Like, what do you think would surprise most people that they may not understand about what you see in a courtroom every day?
I'll tell you the thing that I was so surprised about, particularly on the circuit court, because when I was on the circuit court, that's where all the trials happen. I had dozens and dozens of jury trials. That's where the witnesses come in and give testimony. The thing that One of the things I was most surprised about is things are not always as they seem.
Mhm,
You really have to have an open mind and understand that you don't know everything. You've got to listen really intently and really give each side the grace of not predetermining things because things are not always as you think they are. So that was really, really fun. But I think the other thing too that I realized, and I bring this with me to the Court of Appeals, because at the Court of Appeals, we're writing decisions. We're not sitting in a courtroom like the Supreme Court isn't either, taking the evidence and hearing from the witnesses. It's really important to remember that you only see a piece of people and
mhm,
you might see someone on their worst day.
mhm,
And they still have people who love them. They still have kids who are there supporting them. And I really tried to see the whole person, the whole entirety, and not just say you're a terrible person or not just reach a very, cursory conclusion. I mean, people are complicated and there's complicated issues that come to the court every single day. But I think for me, I really do love people. I really do. I like being around people. I like hearing from them. And so, I think I approach it from a place of deep compassion, empathy for people. And that's who I am. That's how I am as a judge.
yeah, I mean, I think that is a great trait, for somebody to have that is going to be overseeing cases that are gonna, like, change people's lives, not only in the courtroom, but many of them, especially at the Supreme Court level, are gonna have ripple effects, and you're looking at the most complicated cases that have been through many other courts and worked their way up for a reason. So there's a lot of nuance that has to come into that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering for if you could help explain for folks who aren't as familiar with, like, the judiciary as a whole or the like, state Supreme Courts, why that matters so much right now. Well, always, but especially right now.
Yeah. It's such a good question. I don't think in my lifetime our courts have ever been more important. We are seeing a real rollback of our rights at the US Supreme Court level. We are seeing threats to our democracy, threats to our elections. Wisconsin is currently being sued right now by the federal government who wants to get our personal private voting information. So I'm talking about driver's license IDs, pieces of social security numbers. It's alarming And, we have got to have a strong state court to protect us against this overreach we're seeing from the federal government. We know that Wisconsin is a purple state. It's so important in the national landscape. We have got to have judges who are going to make sure the right to vote is protected, our
Mhm.
elections are protected. And it's critical right now. We see what's happening in Atlanta, Georgia. And, we have these really important elections coming up. The people have the right to determine who their representatives are. That's what George Washington said, right? This is not a new concept. This is a basis for our democracy. So it really has compelled me to run for this seat because the state courts, in my opinion, are going to be where our rights and freedoms are going to have to be protected, our democracy, our elections, given
Mhm.
that the US Supreme Court does not seem to be fulfilling its role in holding the two other branches of government accountable. That's
Yeah.
what we do in the judiciary. We're the ones to say, no, you can't do that. That's not constitutional or that's unlawful. So, and my commitment, Kate, to this, I feel so passionately about this, is in stark contrast to my opponent. I'm running against someone who defended, as Scott Walker's attorney, gerrymandered maps.
Mhm.
It's been called the most gerrymandered in the last 40 years. My opponent was supported in her last judicial race by the people who led the charge in trying to overturn our 2020 election, which was rejected by our state Supreme Court by one vote. Just one vote.
That
That's it.
is the craziest thing that I think people really need to understand. If that vote hadn't have happened or went a different way, I mean, it could have changed so many things. Donald Trump was trying to overturn the election results in Wisconsin by having the Supreme Court throw out votes, and they didn't by one
And they
vote.
by one vote. Yes, by one vote. So we can anticipate, depending on what happens in, this November and 2028, that our elections here in Wisconsin are going to be consequential. And there's going to be those who don't like the outcome who might try to do the same thing, throw out votes.
Mhm.
And it's not like there wasn't a look at our election here in 2020. There was. There were a lot of people looking at it, and there was no issue
Yeah.
with our election. It was fair. People turned out to vote. I'm so proud to live in a state where we have such high voting turnout.
Mhm.
People are so hungry. Kate, this is the other thing I'll tell you. Going around the state in this campaign has been absolutely amazing. I'm totally inspired by people. They want to turn out. They want government to work for them, and they are hungry for a government that puts them first. So I am really hoping we're going to have a huge turnout April 7th. Everybody remember April 7th is not that far away,
No, it's
but
not.
the people in our state are really they want government to work for them. They're hungry for it. And that is my commitment as well.
Thank you for that. And I think it's so important because, we talk about, you talk about the different states having power and what George Washington said and that I think people forget that's what the founders wanted. We are the United States of America. So there is like federal power, but then also the states,
Yeah,
there was a point to having things a bit decentralized and it's very important. I mean, we saw I don't know if everybody saw this, but what happened at the Supreme Court in North Carolina, and all of these state Supreme Courts, it's so important that, like, first and foremost, the foundational level is having people in there who are not afraid to be that check and that balance against an administration that has gone beyond the scope of its power, unlike your opponent who is willing to enable behavior that goes against the Constitution. It's not like a moral conversation here. It's just like, is this against the Constitution and the law or not?
exactly. And it shouldn't be a left or right issue. I mean, this is a nonpartisan race. I'm an independent judge, but protecting our rights and our freedoms, our ability to make our personal private healthcare decisions, our ability to pick our representatives, to speak, to peacefully protest. No one does that better than us here in Wisconsin. Well, maybe now Minnesota, they have done a pretty
That's
good
true,
job.
that's true.
Oh my gosh. Wow. But, in our constitution, our state constitution is robust in protecting our right to assemble and peacefully protest. So those are precious rights that we have got to make sure we are standing up for.
Yeah. And then can you talk a little bit about some of the other cases that can sometimes come before the Supreme Court? We talk about like election integrity a lot and democracy, but also there's been some really important cases lately with abortion rights. We all know we had that ban, and even like PFAS in our water and corporate pollution. I mean, are there all different types of cases that can eventually work their way up to the Supreme Court?
Yes. The Supreme Court is different than where I am now at the Court of Appeals because I have to take every appeal. The
Okay.
Supreme Court gets to pick what cases they take. So the cases they take are going to be typically of statewide importance
Hmm.
or involving a legal issue that might not have been addressed or may have been addressed in an incorrect way. But they are taking the most important cases in the state. And it is they take these cases, and these cases, I don't think we always realize how much they impact our day-to-day lives. But I'll
Right.
give you an example because you raised two really good examples. For those of you who don't know, in Wisconsin, we had an 1849 abortion ban that was only not implemented because of Roe versus Wade. When the US Supreme Court, talk about a political decision,
Hmm.
decided that Dobbs decision, which was a political decision, that's all it was. It abandoned precedent, it abandoned uh, how we look at constitutional issues. So that political decision basically kicked our 1849 abortion ban here in Wisconsin into play.
Hmm.
Thankfully, our state Supreme Court refused to implement it on, and I agree with their decision, on a statutory ground. They went through a statutory interpretation, and basically what they decided was there have been so many other abortion restrictions passed since the 1849 ban, they could not basically coexist together, and that the 1849 ban was impliedly repealed by the subsequent actions by the legislature. But the thing about this decision, it was not a decision about what our Constitution here in Wisconsin protects.
Hmm.
So what that means is the legislature can pass more abortion restrictions anytime they want. In fact, again, my opponent and I could not be more different in what we value. I value on the issue of reproductive health care people's ability to make their own personal private healthcare decisions. I've been through a high risk pregnancy. I've experienced pregnancy loss. I've had infertility issues. These are really hard private decisions that women and families have to be able to make in consultation with the best medical care that they can get.
Hmm.
And so that is such a strong, I am so deeply rooted in those principles. Not only have they impacted my own life, I know they impact hundreds of thousands, millions of people's lives, on a daily basis. So my opponent has said she would have voted to implement this abortion ban. She has said that overturning Roe versus Wade was very wise, and she signaled that she would be okay with even more abortion restrictions, including a heartbeat restriction, which is basically a 6 week, 5 or 6 week abortion ban, which would, for
Yeah.
women's health, women's lives, that's where she is. So you can see how extreme she is on this issue. And that's what she's going to bring to the court. And so it's concerning. But thankfully, again, by only one vote, our state Supreme Court struck down this 1849 ban.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it's so important to remember that. And then also another thing, when we're talking about your opponent and any of these concerning figures that are vying for the seat, I mean, this is a 10-year term, right? So I like to think about that as like the candidates I am voting for our state Supreme Court are still gonna be there when my, like, little tiny kids are in high school. And with everything changing so much, like, that is I mean, it is really a vote for the future, and that's why it's so important that everybody gets out there and votes for this because it is I mean, all elections are a very big deal, but this is, it is a very big deal, and I know everybody in Wisconsin has worked so hard to flip the balance and get a pro-democracy majority on the bench the last few years, and we cannot let up the gas because if we are successful in electing you, we would have an even greater majority and just a longer term with voices who are gonna protect our court, protect our state, protect our families and communities.
Absolutely. I mean, if I win this race, and I'm confident with everybody's help I will, but it's
Yes.
a team effort. This is a grassroots campaign. It is a team effort. But if we can get through and win, we will have a pro-democracy majority on the court until at least 2030. So that means we're not hanging off a cliff by a little branch, hoping our rights are protected and our democracy is protected and our votes and our elections are protected.
Well,
So it would be
that should be
huge.
enough motivation for everybody, okay? Like, come on, guys, we can do this the 3rd year in a row right now, and then we'll have, like, maybe a little more breathing room, um, and we can feel a little bit more secure as we're moving forward, and, speaking of that, have any signs from Elon money yet, or is he,
Oh,
did he
yeah.
go away with his tail between his legs and,
Oh, boy. Well, one more point I should make on this issue of this court, because some people say, "Well, why should we care so much?" There's a pro-democracy majority now. Kate, we have 5 elections coming up, 4 after mine.
Right.
So, this can turn on a dime, this composition of the
Mhm.
court. So, that's another reason. We don't know what is gonna go on with Elon Musk. I don't think we're gonna see him. He's not gonna physically be in our state,
But
I'd think.
but we know
But
that there's gonna be a lot of money pouring into that
yes,
side as it always does.
yes, and I was gonna say we might not see him, but we're probably gonna feel his money, in this race. Um, so we're watching it really closely. The the billionaire extremists, far-right extremists came into this race last year about this time.
Okay.
So even if it's not Elon Musk, there are plenty of right wing billionaires who are supporting my opponent. They've
Yeah.
supported her in the past. They helped her get elected to the Court of Appeals, and they have their big, super PACs with all their dark money.
Yeah.
And so we are prepared for that. And I'm really happy where the campaign is. We've gotten so much grassroots support, so many support from people throughout this state. But you see these billionaires come in and they can raise the money that my campaign's been able to raise over the course of 9 months. They can raise it in a day, couple days.
Yeah.
So we're watching that. And I do know that Governor Scott Walker is now involved raising money for my
Oh,
opponent.
great. I mean, yeah, I think that to your point, that's why that grassroots support is so important. Talking to your friends, making sure everybody knows that we have this election coming up in April. What else can people do to learn more about you and or support your campaign?
So people can go on my website, Chris for Justice, CHRISFOR, justice.com. They can sign up to join the campaign, and that means they can volunteer. If people are really loving knocking on doors, we could use that. Whatever people love to do, that's kind of what I tell people who
Mhm,
want to get engaged. Like, well, what do you love to do?
mhm.
Because knocking on doors isn't for everybody, and I understand that. But some people will make phone calls or write postcards or even sending an email out to your friends, family, and your neighbors saying, this election is coming up. There's a real difference here between these candidates, and we need to be doing what we can to protect our state, our kids, our future, our rights. That's also really helpful to use your own networks to communicate that.
Absolutely. I always tell people it's like you can cold call or you can kind of take your warm leads of the people you already know and just remind them because I also know personally I have to remind some people like 3 or 4 times in my life that there's an election coming up and they're always like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." People are busy. So,
Busy.
reach out and remind them a couple times. It's not gonna hurt. Um, well, thank you so much. It was so great getting to know you, and I appreciate this so much, and we will be continuing to watch and supporting your efforts and as you kinda head into this last final sprint.
Thanks so much, Kate, and go moms.
Go moms.
You
Yes.
can do it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.